The Prince. He is a polished blade. He is the collected lands. He is the hunter in the woods. He is the light his retinue follows. His clothes are made for him. His horse is a prince's horse. His tack is of finest hide and of sternest steel. He and his horse both are uniformed in the navy of night. He speaks quietly, with confidence and with bearing. His ground is his. Upon his finger is one ring, bearing the fire of his line. His hands are gloved. His gloves, tough yet soft, bear the horse scent. They ride through his land, through his own questing forest. They ride with sword, spear, and horn. Dogs precede them, yipping, yelping, barking as they scent. The horses follow in the cold air, steaming in muscled release from the confines of stable gates. He rides with his 12 to catch the hart, to spear the tusking boar, to feel the breath of the chase. And with the proceeds slung over the pack horses of huntsmen, he returns to fire, tapestry, and stone, there to witness his pristine consort, there to prepare to feast. Your Royal Highness, as a matter of immediate priority, I would like to convey my deepest affection, appreciation, and respect for Her Majesty and her honoured heir. I would also like to convey my unending admiration for the old Duke. He was one of the very greatest of men. I would also like to convey my deep and long-standing appreciation for the daughter of Igraine and her true support of you. I would also like to convey my admiration for the Duke and the Duchess of the old seat of learning, and their generous and gentle, but also wisely steadfast character. And finally, I would like to convey my very best wishes for the young prince. I am writing to you for two reasons. First, I wish to convey my appreciation for your work. Second, I wish, as a gesture of my appreciation for you personally, to provide you with gifts. Regarding my appreciation for your work, over the course of my life, I have seen and heard, as a member of the public, the disrespect you have received regarding your consideration for the environment in which we live. It has long been clear to me, and this view has strengthened profoundly over time, that you are not only correct, but also demonstrated incredible resolve and integrity in standing by what was clear to you despite the shifting tide of the surrounding culture. As you have for decades made clear, humans must consider and carefully manage their environment for individual and collective health. As an artist, I have focused on depicting beauty, not superficial beauty, but beauty in the philosophical sense, in the infinite sense. I am aware that I am affected by my environment, that my environment must contain nutrition that my body requires, and the nutrition that my mind requires, and the nutrition that my spirit requires. The body is no different from that of any other animal. It requires clean, healthy sustenance in order to thrive. The mind is the same. It requires nutrition in the form of discipline, material analysis, and judgment. The spirit is the extent of our appreciation for that which is most important, the source of influence upon us, the source of itself. Just as the mind guides the body, the spirit guides the mind. Depending on what the spirit is set on, the mind and body follow. Where the spirit is lost and forgotten, the guiding principle is forgotten. It is for that reason, if I may impose for just a moment, that people lost touch even with their own ability to distinguish between the distorted fantasy of a fairy tale and the actual fairy tale, the real fairy tale, the one rooted in actual dynamic spiritual connection, in actual love and partnership. The desire for illusion to be real came to rule, even where it conflicted with clear evidence. The fairy tales of the old world were real. They involved an acute, lived recognition of the tapestry of human, animal, natural connection, not imagined but experienced over hundreds of thousands of years of evolution and passed down through stories and through direct, vivid experience. The new fairy tale, developed in the traumatized aftermath of 2 world wars, pursued by the externalized costs of the Industrial Revolution as exacerbated by modern consumerism, is disconnected from those roots. Clearly, institutions sometimes fail man, but sometimes it is man that fails institutions. To understand the value of the monarchy, it is necessary to understand value, archetypal value. Understanding of the deeper forms of consciousness, the sources of foundational influence that both Plato and Jung, each in their way discussed, is elusive and requires levels of depth and honesty that man often fails to achieve. The monarchy is rooted in the innate recognition of the significance of those forms to the vitality of the community. They are the guiding force of the community, the underlying fabric of the tapestry, the logic that allows the tapestry to hold form and thereby speak with concerted integrity. The foundational necessity to recognize and nurture the underlying fabric of the psychological and social tapestry has been tragically overlooked, and the effects of that oversight are now clear in the damaged health of the environment, in the damaged health of communities, in the extractive consumerist economy, and in political systems that, having lost any true anchor and actual inspiration, sway with every polluted breeze. At risk is the social capital, the evolutionary bloodline of an intelligent way of being, of civilization itself. The internet, of course, is a force multiplier. All of the major issues we face today would be either significantly diminished or would not exist if people had realized and internalized over all these years that you were the one that was correct. Instead, they mocked. Your view was not merely a superficial or romantic appreciation for trees and plants, not even for balanced ecologies or considerately designed architecture. It is an appreciation for how certain elements bolster our development, how they inspire our development, what they ask us to focus on and invest in. Those elements are the underlying fabric of the tapestry. They are what hold the picture together. They are the root archetypes, the root forms, the root influences. They are the gods, the angels, and the heroes. And they have not only been allowed to fray, they have been purposefully, recklessly corroded. Instead, we have seen different forces articulated and manifested, and so children are obese by the time they're 10, and everyone must be able to consume whatever they want, and villages are overcrowded or dying, and cities are swamped, and no one knows who they are or what they are doing. Organisms go extinct when environmental shifts occur too fast for them to effectively respond through reproduction and selection. The shift is a fundamental threat to the organism at the reproductive genetic level. There are 3 typical responses to threat in the immediate experience: fight, flight, or freeze. As a species, we are threatened by the results of our own creations. A few think of flight, isolation, property in the deep wilderness, colonies on other planets. Some think to fight, yourself regarding nature and community, and your primary relationship. But the bulk are frozen. The bulk anesthetize themselves, allow themselves to be enslaved by the currents they live in, which consume them. Children need to see their elders as archetypes by which to know themselves. Each family member bears a reflection of a trait within the child. Each family member brings out of that child that part of the child. Through that reflection, the child may better know who he is as he grows. For complete development, the 2 parents are not enough. The idea that 2 parents is enough, that the nuclear family is sufficient, has existed in only the last 70 years or hundreds of thousands of years of development. Until then, boys would watch the men around them, and they would understand their role through that interaction. When parents think that they can do it all themselves through reading books and thinking that love is enough, they stifle the growth of the child while believing they are protecting the child. The result is that humans in the Western world these days remain children until they are in their early 20s, when 150 years ago a 13-year-old midshipman might be called upon to lead seasoned sailors, and he would be expected to do so with intelligence and maturity. From the moment a child can control his body and understand basic language, the child needs to be challenged and integrated into the world of trusted elders. By keeping them from that world, we stunt the potential of children by allowing a bulk of foundational neurological development to take place in that simplified context. It means that the mind crystallizes while still within the child state, and then is expected to be an adult. And so the biological adult remains a child. Its inherent fundamental expectations are those of a child, tied as if by an anchor to the childhood condition. And then from that state adult decisions are made, and they are, unsurprisingly, problematic. They range from the apparently benign, as over-conditioned love of sweets and the resulting diminishment of expectation regarding true substance in that which is consumed, to the profound, the development of the very same technologies foreseen as dystopic in childhood movies, for example, the meeting of artificial intelligence and robotics. It is not that love and care should be diminished. It is that people fail to recognize that love and care require challenge in the form of the child having to negotiate the actual environment of the world, not some make-believe protected artificial version of the world. As mentioned earlier, the old fairy tales were real, often scary. The child had to be as an adult to overcome the challenge. The human psychology is largely crystallized by the age of 20. That is why it is so difficult to actually change anyone's mind about anything. Therefore, education of children is the key to the future, but not if education will continue to reassert the same mistaken assumptions that the Western world has been living with for the last 70 years. I am passionate about this because I see an artery of intelligence that runs from Plato through the Neoplatonists, through the remarkable scholars of the Islamic Golden Age, through the scholastics, through Hildegard von Bingen, Bach, Beethoven, Wagner, and Jung. That same intelligence in Britain flowered through Gilbert and Sullivan, William Morris, J.M.W. Turner, William Blake, Walter Bagehot, your mother, your father, Monty Python, the Royal Air Force, Land Rovers, David Attenborough, Kenneth Clark, and the Royal Lifeboats, etc. In other words, through the creativity, discipline, industriousness, intelligence, and steadfastness of the British people that allowed them from a tiny island in the North Sea to outcompete every other culture that had so far been developed anywhere in the world. The culture that allowed that victory for civilization did not look like today's culture. I see Plato in Britain. I see Plato in the Arthurian Christian tradition, which is the only version of Christianity that I can relate to. Thomas Mallory's Christianity, the Christianity of the questing warrior who hears Mass alone in a hermitage in the forest. It is a Christianity of plain stone, ancient wood, stained glass, and a stern, solemn silence. It is the Christianity of the warrior monk bearing his wounds in the rain on his path to Platonic perfection. That is what I see as the source blood of Britain at its best, which is itself the source blood of the United States at its best, if only it knew. My father was born too soon to be taken in by the cultural shifts. He believed in the way of his elders and was disgusted by the developments he saw in his lifetime. He distinctly felt the loss of the greatest example of civilization in the history of man. My father seemed old-fashioned against the current of social development happening all around him. He seemed irrelevant and bitter, and yet all the way along it has proved to be the case that he was right about all of it. He was correct, the fabric was corroding, and in the loss of the structure, the picture was becoming confused and nobody seemed to realize that it was happening, or they insisted on ignoring it, or they absurdly thought the collapse of their own house was a good thing. My father couldn't bring himself to take part, and so separated from the expression of his culture in the outer world, he existed quietly and gradually diminished, beaten by the world, yet maintaining internally his fiercely individualistic English integrity fundamentally intact. I wish I could tell him that he was right all along, so I'm telling you instead. The monarchy has not been failing the public. Rather, the public has failed the monarchy by polluting and corroding the country. The public has failed to maintain an understanding of the meaning of the monarchy, which is, in the Parsifalian sense, the spear and the cup, the soul of civilized man. But the spear would perhaps be better understood not as a blade that pierced Christ's side, but rather as the weapon that protects a cup, the weapon borne by the defender of the sanctity of the cup. Right now, the sanctity continues to be threatened by a tide of utter stupidity at every level and in every sector. Right now, the minds of children are being enslaved by technology right before our eyes. Right now, our oceans continue to be polluted, in no small part for the sake of the delivery of mindless packaged products from a culture that is diametrically opposed to all that our rich past stands for, all that our social and political evolution represents. And yet we continue to enrich that culture. For products that waste our minds, we empower precisely that which would undermine everything we most value. The list goes on and on and on. And what do we have for political leadership in the midst of this most delicate moment in our history? Those who would claim to follow Plato have forgotten that the kings were philosophers, and those who claim to follow the way of Plato's city by supposedly upholding the status of the many are responsible for the enormous social and economic crimes, generally as a result of apparently well-intentioned but reckless policies. In addition, they increasingly deride anything that sounds even remotely like traditionalism, and now even go so far as to take pride in asserting confidence in clear absurdities. What they fail to appreciate in their confidence is that it is through traditions that the wisdom of thousands of years' worth of generations is carried. It is the manifestation of that wisdom that allowed mankind to survive, to lock in its gains, to secure its future, enough to allow the luxury to explore what may be possible, with the wisdom to know what to choose in order to get there. With my warmest wishes to you, to your wife, and to your family. Faithfully yours.